Ken Lee Chess is back in another episode of the series Clash of the Titans. We are now on the 13th episode of the series, and Stockfish is up against Leela0 this time. And in this game, Leela0 demonstrates how to attack on both sides of the board or anywhere on the board. Leela can attack you in the center and in any position. Therefore, without further ado, Leela is playing with the black pieces, and white opens up with 1d4, and Leela respond with knight f6, which is the best respond for any d4 opening. Bishop g5, and we have arrived, or we have a Trompowsky type, or we have the Trompowsky opening on the board. Leela attacks the bishop, and the bishop retreats to f4. c5 attacks the center. f3 attacks the knight, and queen a5 with a check, and Stockfish blocks the check by playing c3. Knight retreats back to f6. d5 pushes the pawn forward and gaining space in the center. Queen b6 attacks the vulnerable b2 pawn, and Stockfish defends this by playing bishop c1. d6, e4 stabilizes the center. e6 attacks the pawn chain, and c4 another defender for the vulnerable d5 pawn, and it also helps stabilize the d5 central pawn or central squares. g6 was played with the idea of developing the bishop this way. I cannot make arrows. There you go, and the game continue with knight to e2. Bishop g7. Leela continued with its development. Knight e2 c3, and Leela castle short. Bishop e2, and knight e to e8. It's a retreating move. h4. Now h4, Stockfish only have one thing in mind, is to attack in the king side, or on the king side of the board, where Stockfish or Leela0's king is located. h6. Now h6 is a simple move, because in case if this pawn is forwarded one step, the h pawn, then it will be met with g5, avoiding the exchange, and breaks up the king's pawn that is housing the black king. So it will break the king side if that will happen. The reason probably why the black did not play h5, because of the move g4, and it will automatically breaks the king side of the board, which the black king will become vulnerable. So the game continue with g4. Now Stockfish in this position is all in the attack. So queen d8. Now queen d8, if you look at it, the queen moves to a5 earlier, and then it went back to b6, and now the queen, or the black queen, moves back to its original square. This is a very typical Leela0 move, or should we say Alpha 0 move, because the black pieces or Leela0 defies any principled move, because it moves its queen 3 times already in the opening, so it's not that principled anymore. Thus, who can question the mighty Leela in this position, because probably the engine saw something else. That is why it moves the queen. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to any human players at all, because no one can explain why this move was played. And the game continue with bishop e3. It's a normal development move for the white pieces, and Leela strikes in the center by playing f5. Now f5 is quite an obvious move. It's trying to break the pawn chain, which is, if you look at it, this pawn chain is very strong. White is dominating the center, and as we all know, chess is all about dominance, and whoever controls the center wins the game. Therefore, white played f4, preventing the advance of the f pawn, or the black f pawn, and queen e7, trying to prevent, or probably defending the, or adding another defender to the e pawn. h5 was played, trying to break the king side, and Leela chess0 advanced the pawn to g5. Queen d2 was played in order to support the possible breakup of the f pawn or the g pawn. Therefore, the queen is now ready to help out. e5 was played, and in this position, what do you think a white will do? So the most probably to a human, the most obvious move is to capture in the center like this, right? Or probably this one. But let's have a look. If, let's say, for example, e takes f5, for example, opening up the center and breaking up the black's position on the king side. And if that happens, let's say e takes f, then also the response will be e takes f4, opening up totally the center. The bishop is now very strong because the diagonal is open. The queen is now eyeing the only open file on the position, which is the king hasn't castled yet. So it will continue like this, bishop f2, because of course the bishop was under attack, so it has to retreat, and then f3 will be played. So in this position, white will lose a piece. And there's also another variation. Let's say, like, for example, after e5, and if white respond with g, this is a different variation. If g takes f5, then the continuation will be the same. E takes f4, and if bishop f2, then bishop e5. So now the dark squared bishop has its outpost, and it controls more squares in the center of the board, and it has its diagonal open. Therefore, this will be an advantage for the black pieces. And if you look at it, it has minus 2.4 in the evaluation bar. Therefore, in this position, black is winning. If in case if there will be a break in the center, or if there is a like pawn captures in the center. Therefore, what happened is f takes g5. So in this position, if g takes let's say the continuation is f4, attacking the bishop. And if in this position white played g takes h6, counter-attacking the dark squared bishop. Then the continuation will be pawn takes bishop, attacking the queen, and the queen takes the pawn, and the bishop goes to f6. g5 attacks the bishop, and the bishop takes the pawn. Rook g1, pinning the bishop to the king, and rook f4, blocking the vision of the queen, and the queen relocates to g3, and black can play g4, attacking the bishop on e2, this bishop right here. And if bishop takes g4, then Stockfish can resign because of the move, or the nifty move, bishop h4, which will win the queen. Therefore, after f4, bishop f2 was played, so h takes g5, stabilizing the pawn, which is now a passed pawn, by the way. So queen d3, knight d7, rook g1, bishop f6, knight d2, development, queen f7, white castled long, bishop d8. Now, bishop d8, the only idea is to relocate the bishop to a different diagonal, which it will become active and putting pressure on the knight in this diagonal. So that's the only idea why it moved back to d8. And the game continue with knight f3, blocking the advance of the f pawn, king h7, rook g2, trying to, or with the idea of doubling the rook right here on the g file, a6, preparing to advance the pawn on the queen side and creating a space advantage, and making any space or possible more space on the queen side. And the game continue with rook dg1. So like I said, it planned to create a battery on the g file in case if the g file will soon be opened. So the threat is simple. It's either the knight will be sacrificed, or if the knight, or probably the knight goes there as a sacrifice, and if the pawn takes it, then the g pawn can now advance, which is, if that happens, then Leela0 can just simply resign. But at the moment, it's not happening yet, and the game continue with rook g8, trying to prevent the knight sacrifice on the g5 pawn, and then queen c2. Now let's go back a bit. Rook g8. After black played rook g8, so this move can be played, or like I said earlier, it's the knight that can hop there, but yeah, in this occasion bishop can go there, and in case if pawn takes bishop, then g5. So it's the same idea actually. So the game continue with king h8, because the queen is eyeing the diagonal, and Leela doesn't want the king to be caught in the crossfire. So king b1, the white king also moves and hide. Rook b8, preparing for the advance of the b pawn, king a1. The king moves and hide in the corner of the board. Knight e f6. So the knight forwards. Knight d1. Bishop a5. So now the bishop has fully transformed or was relocated and pressuring the dark square diagonal in the or on the queen side of the board. Knight h4 with the same idea. In case if the knight will be captured, then pawn g5 will happen. So yeah, let's show it to you. If g takes knight, then bishop can capture it, and then knight h7 and then g5. So that's the simple idea with a simple threat of advancing the pawn with a fork. So the game continue with knight f8, bishop f3, and in this position, let's go back to knight f8. So the threat is simple as well. If Leela doesn't capture the knight, let's say like this, then the threat is simple. Knight g6 with a check, and if knight takes knight, then pawn takes knight, queen takes pawn, rook h2 with a check, king g7 hide of course, and rook g h1 doubling up on the h open file, and then b5. So this is what I'm talking about. Leela will attack you on both sides of the board. If Leela saw something that your pieces are aiming towards, all of your pieces are concentrating on the king side of the board, then Leela will attack you. This is really very instructive because it only proves one thing, that if, and we can learn from this actually. I'm not trying to say anything or insinuating anything, but all I'm saying is that we can learn from this, because if Leela's opponent, which in this case is Stockfish, the world's #1, consolidate his pieces on the king side, therefore Leela will attack you on the queen side of the board. So if Leela saw that the opponent is consolidating the pieces on the king side, then she will just attack you on the other side. I just said that already and I keep on repeating it. Anyway, the game will continue. Bishop f3, b5 attacks you on the queen side, knight c3, queen e8, knight b1, rook b7. This is a lot of maneuvering, and when the knight hops to f5, Leela captured the outpost knight, and pawn takes bishop, knight h7 to h6, advance the pawn, bishop b4, queen e2, bishop takes c4, b takes c4, bishop e1, queen d8. Let's go back a bit. Let's say for example in this position, it's kind of like let's say for example in this position, if Stockfish played queen takes pawn, so the continuation will be queen b5, offering an exchange of queen, and if queen takes queen, then a takes queen. Therefore this is really too strong. Probably in this position Stockfish can already resign, because if you look at it, like I said earlier, that if Leela's opponent is consolidating its pieces on the king side, then Leela will attack you on the other side of the board. And in this occasion, or in this position, whoever, or it's only Leela who is controlling the semi-A file, which is this one. And Leela can utilize all its forces to attack this side of the board while his king is safe on the H8 square. So yes, the game continue with queen d8 and knight c3, rook b8, king b1, bishop a3, knight a4, c3, and the bishop captures and protects the pawn on b2. Queen d7 attacks the knight. Stockfish defends it. Bishop b4, offering an exchange of bishop. Stockfish moves the king. Queen b7, queen c2, a5, queen e2, queen d7. There's loads of maneuvering again. Queen d1, and then c4. a3 attacks the bishop. Queen b5, and hold on one moment. If let's say, for example, if the pawn capture in this position, because Stockfish moves the queen to c2. However, if we go back a bit, and probably you will ask why, oh, the bishop is hanging, why can't white capture it? So if in this position pawn takes bishop, then pawn takes pawn, attacking the bishop. And if bishop e1, then rook e8 wins the knight. So the piece can be recovered, and it's quite dangerous. Like I said earlier, that the A file is only for the black pieces, and if you look at it, the white pieces are most of them are most of them are on the king side of the board. So after queen c2, queen e8 again, bishop e2, queen d7, and bishop f3. So let's go back a bit again. There's a variation. If, let's say, in this position bishop takes c4, then bishop takes bishop on c3, knight takes bishop, and then g4 is too strong. If you look at it now, that the white pieces are trying to consolidate on the queen side where most of its pieces are, and Leela attacks on the other side of the board. This is what I'm talking about, really. So the game continue with queen b5, bishop d1, and white is now consolidating where the attack is more important on the queen side of the board. The white king is located there, so knight takes bishop, queen c5, queen d2, queen d4, offering an exchange of queens. Now in this position, if Stockfish believes that the exchange of queen will ease the tension or the pressure on Leela's attack, then it will happen like this. Or if it will if the variation happens, then queen takes queen, pawn takes queen, and knight e2, for example, then this knight e2 will lead to f3, which is a fork. So definitely white is losing in this position. So let's say, for example, going back here, let's say like queen takes queen, pawn takes queen, and if the knight goes to b1 instead of going to e2, then knight takes pawn, and the central squares, or the center, is now being dominated by the black pieces. So therefore queen e1 was played, and queen b6, queen d2, rook b7, a4, queen c5, queen e1, more maneuvering, rook b4, queen d2 again, queen b6, queen c1, queen d4, queen c2 again, and rook b3, bishop e2. And in this position, Leela sacrificed the rook. According to Gotham Chess, the rook. Well, not exactly sacrifice, it's just losing the exchange, but queen takes rook, queen takes queen, pawn takes queen, and knight takes e4. Still, the central pawns falls in the hands of the black pieces. So bishop attacks the knight, and the knight retreats, and when the bishop goes back to e2 attacking the pawn, this pawn, then the vacated square where the knight was earlier was now replaced with the pawn, and the center is now again, well, it's been dominated by the black pieces earlier, but it's now very apparent that the center is now being controlled by the black pieces. So bishop takes pawn, g4, advance on the king side, and rook b2, trying to infiltrate on the other side of the board, but that's the only way, or that's the only move that Stockfish can think of, because like I said, it's only trying to infiltrate on that side of the board. And when knight g5 was played, rook b6, infiltrating, attacking the pawn, and when the knight hops back to f7, protecting the d6 pawn, then the rook or the bishop retreats. f3 was played, ready to advance its pawns. c4 was also played, advancing. The threat is simple, is to push this pawn, and if the black pawn captured it, then the knight hangs, and if the knight captured the other pawn, then the pawn can now advance to its probably 3 more squares to for its glory. So the game continue with knight d7 attacking the rook, and the rook attacks the knight, and the knight defends each other by hopping to e5. f6 was played, advancing the pawn for any possible counterattack. e3 was pushed. Now if you look at it, the threat is simple, is to push this pawn right there, and the bishop has no more squares to go. So the rook was forced to retreat. e2 was played, bishop takes e2, and pawn takes bishop, and rook e3 attacks the pawn, and the knight hops to f3. So attacking the rook instead, And if this rook captures this pawn in order to prevent the pawn from queening or from promoting, then this rook on g1 will fall. Therefore, f7 was played in order to create a counter-attack attacking the rook, and Leela just moved the rook to f8, and rook takes g4, and Leela promotes the pawn to a queen, which Stockfish captured the newly promoted queen, and Leela played knight takes rook on e1. And in this position, Stockfish resigns the game because there is nothing more to be done. And if you look at it, it's losing, in spite of the fact that it has 2, 4, 5 pawns against 2, but Leela has an extra piece, an extra knight. Therefore, Stockfish resigns the game. So that's it for now. I hope we enjoyed watching or analyzing the game. And the reason why we choose to cover Indian games is because we don't want to have like any human games, and we don't want to have any or to critique any human games because we're not experts. And it's apart from that, we can learn something from an engine or from the engine games. This is all for now, and I hope to see you again next time, and bye for now.